What made me call in a favor I swore I'd never use? My 7-year-old daughter, Sophia, came back from her father's house in Minneapolis with chunks of her beautiful brown hair missing. I found her in our bathroom at 3 a.m., sitting on the cold tile floor with craft scissors, cutting more hair off. The fluorescent light made her look ghostly pale, and I could see she'd been crying. When I knelt down and gently took the scissors from her trembling hands, she whispered something that made my blood freeze. "Daddy's friends pick one girl for the special room every weekend. I have to be the ugly one or they'll choose me next time." Her voice was so small, so matter-of-fact, like she was telling me about homework or what she had for lunch. She was shaking so violently that she threw up right there on the bathroom floor. I held her hair back and rubbed her shoulders while she heaved, and that's when I noticed more chunks missing from the back of her head that I hadn't seen before. Someone had been cutting her hair for weeks, making it look uneven and choppy. This wasn't the first time. The next morning, I called my ex-husband, Derek, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were shaking as I held the phone. "What happened to Sophia's hair?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like maybe she'd just had an accident with some gum. "You're absolutely insane, Rebecca," he said in that calm, condescending tone that used to make me second-guess myself during our marriage. "I'm recording this entire conversation, by the way. The family court judge is going to love hearing about how you're filling Sophia's head with sick fantasies and then blaming me for your daughter's behavioral problems." The custody threat. He always went straight for the jugular, reminding me that he had just as much legal right to our daughter as I did, and that any accusations I made could backfire spectacularly. I'd been through this dance before. Anytime I questioned something about his parenting or his living situation, he'd immediately flip it around and threaten to take Sophia away from me permanently. Derek, I'm not making accusations," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm just asking what happened to her hair. She's upset about it, and I want to understand." "She probably cut it herself," he interrupted. "Kids do weird things for attention. Maybe if you weren't working so much and actually paid attention to your daughter, you'd know that. I'll be documenting this conversation as evidence of your unstable behavior." He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone and wondering if I was losing my mind. Was I overreacting? Was this just normal childhood behavior that I was blowing out of proportion because of my complicated feelings about Derek? But then, 3 days later, something happened that proved I wasn't crazy at all. Madison showed up at our front door that Tuesday evening, and the moment I saw her, my heart sank. Madison was one of Derek's 8 daughters. Yes, 8 daughters total, that he had with 6 different women across the Minneapolis metro area. The custody arrangement was complicated, with different girls visiting on different weekends, but Madison was there with her mom, Carolina, who lived about 20 minutes away in Bloomington. Madison is 8 years old, with the most gorgeous red curly hair you've ever seen, or at least she used to have gorgeous red curly hair. When I opened the door, I could see that chunks were missing from around her ears and the back of her neck, cut in the same choppy, desperate way that Sophia's had been. Carolina looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and that particular kind of stress that comes from single parenting. "I'm sorry to bother you, Rebecca," she said, holding Madison's hand tightly. "But Madison has been asking to see Sophia, and she keeps saying something about how Sophia saved me. I don't understand what that means, and Madison won't explain it to me." I invited them in and made hot chocolate while the girls sat at my kitchen table, whispering to each other in that intense way that kids do when they're sharing secrets. I noticed Madison kept touching the shorter patches of her hair self-consciously, and Sophia kept nodding like she understood something that the adults in the room didn't. Madison cut her hair last weekend," Carolina told me quietly while we stood by the stove. "I found her in the bathroom at midnight with my sewing scissors. When I asked her why, she said she had to be ready for her turn, but she wouldn't tell me her turn for what. Then she started crying and said Sophia taught her how to do it right." That's when it clicked. This wasn't isolated to just my daughter. Whatever was happening at Derek's house was affecting multiple children, and they were protecting each other in the only way they knew how. Sophia had figured out some kind of system, and she was teaching the other girls how to survive. Over the next week, I did something that probably sounds obsessive, but I had to know the truth. I called every single mother whose daughter visited Derek's house on weekends. There were 6 women total, scattered across different suburbs of Minneapolis, and most of them had similar stories. Jennifer from Medina told me her daughter Chloe had been keeping a small notebook hidden under her mattress. When Jennifer found it, it was filled with dates and initials, tracking what she called basement turns. Jennifer had thought it was some kind of imagination game and hadn't paid much attention until I called. Brenda from St. Paul said her 6-year-old daughter, Aisha, had been practicing something she called making herself invisible by drawing on her face with washable markers at 2 a.m. When Brenda found her, Aisha was sitting in front of the bathroom mirror, making herself look as unattractive as possible. The most heartbreaking call was to Linda from Minnetonka. Her daughter Grace, who's only 5 years old, had started sleeping under her bed instead of on it. When Linda asked why, Grace said she needed to practice being in small spaces for when it was her turn to go downstairs. 3 days before Sophia's next scheduled weekend visit with Derek, I got a text message from his girlfriend Amanda that made my skin crawl. "Your daughter is teaching bad habits to the younger children. Now, none of them are suitable anymore. This behavior needs to stop immediately." The word suitable made me want to throw up. Suitable for what? What were these children supposed to be suitable for? I knew I needed official help, so I gathered everything I had: photos of the girls' destroyed hair, written statements from 5 mothers, and a timeline of when each incident had occurred. I printed out every text message Derek had sent me, including Amanda's disturbing message about the girls being unsuitable. The Hennepin County Child Protective Services office in downtown Minneapolis was exactly what you'd expect: fluorescent lighting, worn carpet, and the smell of too many people and too much stress. I sat across from a caseworker named Janet Morrison, a woman in her 50s, who looked like she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by anything anymore. "Children cut their hair all the time," she said, barely glancing at the photos I'd carefully organized in a folder. "Without evidence of physical abuse, and I mean actual physical evidence, not just haircuts, we can't launch an investigation based on what sounds like normal childhood behavior." But 5 different children, all doing the same thing, all talking about basement time and taking turns? I pressed. "That's not normal childhood behavior. That's coordinated survival behavior." Janet actually sighed and looked at me like I was wasting her time. "Mrs. Thompson, I see a lot of divorced parents who come in here with conspiracy theories about their ex-spouses. Children have active imaginations, especially when they're caught between 2 households with different rules." She wrote something in her notes, and when I craned my neck to see what it said, I caught the words, "Mother appears to be coaching child." My heart sank. Not only was she not taking this seriously, she was actively undermining my credibility. "I'm not coaching anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm reporting what multiple children have said independently to different mothers in different cities." "Have you considered family therapy?" Janet asked. "Sometimes children act out when they feel loyalty conflicts between their parents. There are resources available to help blended families communicate better." I left that office feeling more hopeless than when I'd arrived. 3 days wasted, and now I was officially on record as a potentially unstable mother who might be coaching her child to make false accusations. If this went to court, that note in Janet's file could destroy any credibility I had. My last hope was Linda Morrison, Grace's mother. Linda was a prosecutor with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and if anyone would know how to navigate the system, it would be her. When I called her that evening, she sounded as frustrated as I felt. "I tried going through official channels too," she told me. "I know the right people, I know how to file the right paperwork, and I still got nowhere. Grace's behavior has gotten worse since I talked to CPS. She's having nightmares every night, and she keeps asking if she's in trouble for telling secrets. Linda's daughter, Grace, was the one who really broke my heart. She used to have the most beautiful blonde hair, so long she could sit on it. Grace was always Derek's special helper, according to what the other girls had told their mothers. She got picked for basement time 2 months ago and hadn't been the same since. She sleeps under her bed every night now, Linda said, and I could hear her crying on the other end of the phone. She won't let me help her bathe anymore, and she draws these pictures that terrify me. Stairs going down into darkness with little stick figures at the bottom. When I ask her about the drawings, she just says, "That's where the pretty girls go." The most devastating detail was that Grace had kept all the hair she'd cut off, saved in a shoebox under her bed with a label written in her careful kindergarten handwriting, "Before." With 3 days left until Sophia's next visit, I decided to try the Minneapolis Police Department one more time. I drove to the 3rd Precinct station on Minnehaha Avenue, the same folder of evidence in my hands, hoping that maybe a different perspective would help. Officer Michael Peterson looked like he was barely out of police academy, with perfectly pressed uniform and that eager-to-help expression that you see in recruitment brochures. But as I started explaining the situation, I watched his expression change from interest to skepticism to barely concealed annoyance. Let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're reporting that multiple children cut their own hair, and you think this constitutes evidence of, what exactly, child abuse?" "I think it constitutes evidence that these children are trying to protect themselves from something," I said, "and I think that something is happening in my ex-husband's basement during custody visits." Officer Peterson actually smirked. "Ma'am, little girls playing hairdresser isn't a crime. Maybe you should focus on being a better co-parent instead of looking for ways to cause drama with your ex-husband." He slid the photos back across the desk without really looking at them, and that's when he dropped the bombshell that made me realize how deep Derek's manipulation went. "Besides," Officer Peterson said, "your ex-husband already called us. He warned us that you might come in with wild stories about him. He's concerned about your mental state and thinks you might need professional help." Derek had preemptively poisoned the well. He'd called the police before I'd even thought about going to the police, framing me as an unstable ex-wife with a vendetta. Now, anything I said would be seen through that lens. Did he mention that 6 different mothers have made similar reports?" I asked desperately. "Did he explain why 8 different children are all exhibiting the same fear-based behavior?" "Look, lady," Officer Peterson said, his patience clearly exhausted. "Family drama isn't police business unless someone gets hurt. Come back if you have actual evidence of actual crimes." I drove home feeling completely defeated. The system that was supposed to protect children was actively working against me, and Derek was smart enough to stay one step ahead of every move I tried to make. That night, Sophia stood in front of our bathroom mirror, touching the small patches of hair that had started to grow back. Her reflection looked so small and vulnerable in the dim light. "It's getting pretty again," she said in that matter-of-fact voice that broke my heart every time. "I'll have to go downstairs next time?" My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer, James Richardson. Derek had filed a motion claiming I was coaching Sophia to make false allegations and requesting supervised visitation for me. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, which meant I had no legal grounds to keep Sophia home this Friday. I called James immediately, begging him to find some way around it. "Tell the judge I'm sick, that I'm in the hospital, that I've been arrested. Any lie that would let me keep her home this Friday." James stayed silent while I cried into the phone, and then he said the words that shattered what was left of my hope. "Rebecca, if you don't send Sophia for her court-ordered visit, you'll lose custody permanently. Derek's lawyer is already building a case that you're unstable and interfering with his parental rights. Missing a visit right now would be the final nail in the coffin." I had 24 hours to decide between contempt of court or sending my daughter back to that house. Every legal avenue had been exhausted, every official channel had failed, and time was running out. The next morning at breakfast, Sophia did something that broke me completely. She gave me Madison's hair ribbon, a small pink bow with sparkles on it, and said quietly, My hair grew back too fast last time. Madison had to go instead of me because hers was still short. The guilt in her 7-year-old voice was unbearable. She felt responsible for another child's suffering because her hair had grown faster than expected. These children had created their own terrible economy of sacrifice, where they took turns bearing whatever horror was waiting in that basement. I spent that day making desperate phone calls, trying to find any resource I hadn't already exhausted. I called domestic violence hotlines, child advocacy centers, and even tried to reach out to investigative journalists who might be willing to look into the story. But without concrete evidence, and with Derek's preemptive strikes against my credibility, no one was willing to take action. Friday morning arrived gray and rainy, typical October weather in Minneapolis. Sophia had packed her overnight bag with the mechanical precision of a child who'd learned to survive by following routines. She included the craft scissors in her bag, and when I asked her why, she said, "In some kamercase, damertain avmam nanerkane hem ed. Tamer dat dum dat chi to fix my hair again." With 1 hour left before the court-mandated handoff, Sophia gripped my hand in the car like she was drowning and I was her only lifeline. "Mama, what if I can't make myself ugly enough this time? What if they pick me anyway?" I wanted to turn the car around and drive until we reached Canada or Mexico or anywhere that Derek couldn't follow us, but I knew that would only make things worse for Sophia in the long run. If I violated the custody order, Derek would get full custody, and then I wouldn't be able to protect her at all. When we pulled into Derek's driveway in his affluent neighborhood in Edina, 3 other cars were already there. I watched with growing horror as the other mothers walked their daughters to the front door. Selena climbed out of the first car, 5 years old with blonde curls that reached her waist. Then Isabella, age 7, with beautiful dark hair that caught the light. Sophia saw them and started screaming in the back seat. "Not them! They're too pretty! I was supposed to be the ugly one this time." The other mothers looked stricken, clearly understanding more than they had before. We were all delivering our daughters to the same fate, and we were all powerless to stop it within the confines of the legal system. That's when I made the decision that would either save my daughter or destroy my life completely. I wasn't just dropping Sophia off tonight. I was getting into that basement myself, and I was going to get the evidence that everyone else refused to believe existed. I called my cousin Marcus from the parking lot, my hands shaking as I dialed. Marcus was ex-military police, 2 tours in Iraq, and he'd seen things that most people couldn't imagine. More importantly, he knew about Uncle Larry, Derek's uncle who had abused both Marcus and me when we were children. The family had never talked about it, but Marcus and I both carried those scars. "Remember what Uncle Larry did to us when we were kids?" I said when Marcus answered. "It's happening again, and this time it's my daughter." Marcus didn't need more explanation. "Give me 20 minutes, he said, and I could hear him already moving, grabbing keys, probably checking his service pistol. "Who do you need me to call, no?" Bring David if you can," I said. David was Marcus's younger brother, also ex-military, and the 2 of them had learned to work as a team in combat situations. And Marcus? Derek's been setting me up to look like an unstable ex-wife. If this goes wrong, I'm going to lose custody forever. "Rebecca," Marcus said in that steady voice that had gotten him through war zones, "you're not losing anything tonight except the thing that's hurting your daughter. We're going to handle this." While I waited, I watched the other mothers saying goodbye to their daughters at Derek's front door. The body language told the whole story. Children clinging to their mothers, mothers reluctantly letting go, Derek and Amanda smiling and acting like perfect hosts while something monstrous waited in the basement below. Marcus arrived with David, both of them in tactical gear that they probably shouldn't have owned as civilians, but had never bothered to turn in after their military service ended. They'd done 3 tours together in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they moved with the kind of coordinated precision that you only get from trusting your life to the person next to you. "What's the plan?" Marcus asked, checking his sidearm. "I need evidence," I said. Real evidence that will hold up in court and convince people who don't want to believe this is happening. Derek's been setting up a narrative that I'm crazy and vindictive, so whatever we find has to be undeniable. And the kids? David asked. We get them out first, I said. All of them. Tonight. I don't care what it takes or what laws we have to break. Marcus studied Derek's house, noting the escape routes and sightlines like he was planning a military operation, which, in a way, he was. How many adults are we dealing with? Derek and Amanda for sure, I said, but there were 3 other cars here, so probably some of his friends. The ones Sophia mentioned who helped choose which girl goes to the basement. Combat load, Marcus said to David, who nodded and checked his gear. They'd brought zip ties, tactical lights, and probably other equipment that I didn't want to know about. Derek came out of the house at that moment, ready to gloat about his legal victory and my powerlessness to protect my own daughter. But his expression changed completely when he saw Marcus and David. Derek had met Marcus at family gatherings over the years and knew about his military background. Get inside, Marcus said quietly, but with the kind of authority that made people obey automatically. Derek's confident smile disappeared, replaced by fear. The other mothers instinctively held their daughters back as we followed Derek into the house. I could see them exchanging glances, realizing that something was happening but not sure if they should call for help or run. I mouthed, "Trust me," to Linda, and something in my expression must have convinced her because she nodded and quietly moved the children toward the front door. Amanda tried to run when she saw us coming, which was a mistake. David caught her in the kitchen before she made it to the back door, and she was zip-tied to a chair within seconds. She started screaming about kidnapping and assault, but Marcus calmly explained that we were conducting a citizen's arrest pending investigation of child abuse. "This is kidnapping," Derek shouted, backing against the wall. "You just lost custody forever, Rebecca. I'm calling the police." "Where's the basement?" I cut him off. "I want you to call the police," Marcus said to Derek. "I want them to see what we're about to find down there." Derek's face went white. "You can't go down there. Please, you don't understand the situation." Marcus had already found the basement door. 3 locks, just like Sophia had described when I'd asked her about the layout of Derek's house. He had them picked in under a minute, which was apparently a skill he'd learned during his military service for situations I didn't want to think about. "My, please," Derek said, his voice breaking. "The children aren't supposed to see that room. It's not what you think." "Or what are we going to think?" I asked, my phone already recording everything. "Tell me what we're going to find down there." The pretty ones go downstairs," he whispered. "But it's not. It's educational. We're teaching them about the real world, about how men think, about what they need to know to protect themselves when they grow up." I felt sick to my stomach, but I moved toward the stairs anyway. The children needed to see that the nightmare was ending, that adults were finally taking action to protect them. The wooden steps creaked under my weight as I went down into the darkness, my phone's flashlight cutting through shadows that had hidden too many secrets. Cold air wrapped around me, and I could see my breath in little puffs. A single bulb hung from a wire in the middle of the ceiling, swaying back and forth and throwing crazy shadows on the gray concrete walls. My phone shook in my hand, but I kept recording everything. The smell hit me first, like old gym socks mixed with something sour and chemical that made my stomach flip. Fear has a smell, and it had saturated this place over months of terror. At the bottom of the stairs, I stopped and stared at what they'd set up down here. It was worse than anything I'd imagined, and I'd imagined some terrible things. A professional video camera on a tripod stood in the corner, pointed at a small mattress on the floor. The mattress had stains on it and no sheets, just bare plastic that could be easily cleaned. SD cards were scattered across a wooden table next to the tripod, labeled with dates going back over a year. 4 metal rings were bolted into the walls at different heights, sized for different ages of children. Rope was coiled next to each one, along with other restraints that I didn't want to examine too closely. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk closer and film every detail. A makeup station had been set up against one wall, with bright lights and a mirror surrounded by cosmetics. But these weren't normal cosmetics. They were stage makeup designed to make children look older, more mature than their actual ages. Wigs hung from hooks on the wall in different styles and colors. Marcus called down from the top of the stairs, asking if I was okay. I managed to say yes, even though my whole body was shaking. I needed to document everything before the police got here, assuming they would actually come when called. Derek started yelling from upstairs about lawsuits and kidnapping charges and how we'd all go to jail. His voice sounded scared now instead of angry, which meant he was starting to understand that his carefully constructed world of secrets was collapsing. On the table next to the SD cards, I found a notebook with a pink unicorn cover. Inside were dates going back over a year, with different initials next to each date. S for Sophia appeared frequently in the early months, but less after 2 months ago when she'd started cutting her hair. M for Madison showed up more recently. GR had the most marks next to her initials. Grace Rose from Linda's descriptions. The pattern made me want to vomit. Each weekend, one set of initials got marked with a star. The pretty ones went downstairs, just like Sophia had said. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the notebook, but I filmed every page, making sure the dates and initials were clearly visible. David was keeping Derek and Amanda secured in the kitchen, while Marcus came down to see what I'd found. A metal cabinet sat against the far wall with a heavy padlock on it. Marcus had it picked in 30 seconds, which revealed the true scope of what had been happening here. Inside were dozens of SD cards and plastic cases with dates written on labels. 2 years' worth of weekend dates. Marcus's face went white when he saw how many there were, and we both knew what these recordings probably showed. Amanda started screaming from upstairs that we didn't understand anything. Her voice got higher and more hysterical as she insisted that they were teaching the girls important life lessons about how the world really works. I ran back up the stairs with my phone still recording to catch her words. She kept going even when she saw me filming, like she thought she could justify what they'd done. The pretty ones get too much attention and need to be brought down, she screamed. We were teaching them humility and respect. We were preparing them for what men really want so they wouldn't be naive when they grow up. By traumatizing children? I asked, keeping my voice level despite the rage building inside me. By showing them reality, Amanda shot back. By teaching them that beauty comes with consequences and that they need to learn to protect themselves. Those girls were going to learn these lessons eventually anyway. We were just controlling the environment. Every word she said was being recorded, and I could see Derek's face growing more panicked as he realized that Amanda was confessing to everything we'd suspected. Marcus had found Derek's computer in the home office and was downloading files while David maintained security. The children were safe outside with their mothers, far enough away that they couldn't hear Amanda's disturbing justifications or Derek's increasingly desperate threats. You don't understand the psychology involved, Derek said, trying to regain control of the narrative. These children were developing unhealthy attachments to their physical appearance. We were helping them understand that their value comes from more than just looks. By sexually exploiting them? Marcus asked flatly. By educating them, Derek insisted. Everything we did was educational. We were teaching them about consent and boundaries and how to say no in real-world situations. By forcing them into situations where they couldn't say no? I asked. By creating safe spaces for them to learn important lessons, Derek said, but his voice was getting weaker as he realized how insane his justifications sounded when spoken out loud. The computer files that Marcus was downloading showed the true scope of their operation: email exchanges with other men, payment records, and video files organized by date and participant. What we'd discovered wasn't just child abuse. It was a carefully organized business with multiple customers and detailed record-keeping. The police finally arrived, not because Derek had called them, but because one of the neighbors had seen the unusual activity and reported possible domestic violence. When Detective Sarah Martinez walked into the house and saw what we'd found, her expression changed from annoyance at being called out on a Friday night to grim determination. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording and step away from the evidence," she said to me, but not unkindly. "This is now a crime scene, and we need to preserve the chain of custody." "I have everything documented," I said, handing her my phone. 2 hours of video evidence, including confessions from both suspects. Detective Martinez quickly realized that this was much bigger than a domestic dispute. She called for backup, crime scene techs, and the Special Victims Unit. Within an hour, Derek's house was swarming with investigators, and Amanda and Derek were in custody. The children were taken to Children's Hospital for medical exams, which was heartbreaking but necessary. I sat with Sophia while a gentle pediatric nurse practitioner checked her for signs of physical abuse. Sophia was brave throughout the exam, answering questions in her matter-of-fact way and helping the adults understand what had been happening. Did anyone ever touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable?" the nurse practitioner asked. "They made us practice being quiet," Sophia said, "and they took pictures of us in pretty dresses, but I made myself ugly so they wouldn't pick me for the special pictures." The other mothers were dealing with similar conversations with their daughters. Some of the children had been physically abused. Others had been subjected to inappropriate photography and video recording. All of them had been traumatized by the environment of fear and the constant threat of selection. Linda found me in the hospital hallway around midnight. Grace's exam had revealed evidence of sexual assault, and Linda looked like she'd aged 10 years in one evening. "I keep thinking about all the times Grace tried to tell me something was wrong," she said, crying quietly. "She drew those pictures of stairs going down into darkness, and I thought it was just imagination. She slept under her bed because she was practicing being in small spaces, and I thought it was a phase. The children were trying to protect each other and protect us," I said. "They knew we were powerless within the system, so they created their own survival strategies." "Sophia saved Grace," Linda said, "by teaching her to cut her hair, by showing her how to make herself less attractive to those monsters. If your daughter hadn't figured out their system..." We sat in that hallway until dawn, waiting for the medical exams to be completed and trying to process what we'd learned. 7 families had been living this nightmare, and only the children had understood the true scope of what was happening. The legal proceedings that followed were both satisfying and exhausting. Derek and Amanda were charged with multiple felonies including child sexual abuse, child endangerment, production of child pornography, and operating a criminal enterprise. The evidence we'd gathered, combined with the medical exams and the children's testimonies, built an airtight case. Derek tried to claim that everything had been Amanda's idea, that he'd been manipulated and coerced into participating. Amanda tried to claim that Derek had threatened her into compliance. Neither story held up under scrutiny, especially given the detailed records they'd kept and the evidence of financial transactions. The most damning evidence came from Derek's own computer files, which showed months of planning and coordination with other men who had paid for access to the children. The FBI got involved when they discovered that some of the video files had been distributed across state lines, making it a federal case. My custody battle with Derek became irrelevant overnight. He was facing decades in prison, and parental rights are automatically terminated for convicted child abusers. The custody motion he'd filed claiming I was unstable was withdrawn, and his lawyer quietly disappeared from the case. The hardest part was explaining to Sophia what would happen next. She was worried that she was in trouble for cutting her hair and for not telling adults about the basement sooner. Child psychologists helped her understand that she'd been incredibly brave and that she'd saved other children by figuring out how to protect them. "Will Daddy be angry that I told the secret?" she asked during one of our therapy sessions. "Daddy can't hurt you anymore," I said, "and the secret you told wasn't a bad secret. It was a secret that kept you and your friends safe." The trial took 8 months to complete, with testimony from all 8 children and dozens of expert witnesses. The children were allowed to testify via closed-circuit television so they wouldn't have to face Derek and Amanda in the courtroom. Sophia's testimony was heartbreaking and powerful. She explained how she'd figured out that the men preferred children with long, beautiful hair, and how she'd taught the other girls to make themselves less attractive to avoid being selected. "I didn't want to be ugly," she said in her small voice, "but I didn't want to go to the basement either, so I made my hair ugly so they wouldn't pick me." Did you teach the other girls to cut their hair too?" the prosecutor asked gently. "Yes," Sophia said, "because they were scared like me, and I wanted to help them not get picked." Derek received a sentence of 25 years to life, without the possibility of parole for 18 years. Amanda received 15 years with the possibility of parole after 8 years. Both were required to register as sex offenders and were banned from unsupervised contact with children for life. The months following the trial were focused on healing and rebuilding normal life for our children. All 7 girls started therapy with specialists who understood childhood trauma, and the families met regularly for support group sessions. Sophia's hair slowly grew back, but more importantly, her personality started to emerge again. She'd been so focused on survival and protecting other children that I'd forgotten how funny and creative she could be when she felt safe. She started first grade that fall with hair in pigtails and a backpack covered in unicorn patches. The school knew about our situation and provided extra support, but they also treated Sophia like any other child, which was exactly what she needed. "Look, Mama," she said one morning, admiring herself in the bathroom mirror. "My hair is getting long again, but it's okay because the bad people can't see it anymore." The other families became like extended family to us. We celebrated birthdays together, had regular barbecues, and created new traditions that were about joy instead of survival. The children played normal games and worried about normal things like homework and what to watch on TV. Madison started taking dance classes and discovered she loved performing. Grace learned to sleep in her own bed again and started drawing pictures of flowers and rainbows instead of dark stairwells. Selena joined a soccer team and scored 3 goals in her first game. The state established a victim compensation fund that helped pay for therapy and medical expenses. They also admitted that the system had failed us initially and implemented new protocols for investigating reports involving multiple children showing similar behaviors. Detective Martinez became a regular presence in our lives, checking on the children and helping us navigate the ongoing legal processes. She told me that our case had changed how her department handled child abuse investigations. "You taught us to look for patterns that aren't obvious," she said. "Children protecting each other in ways that adults don't recognize as distress signals." 2 years after that horrible night, I looked around at our summer barbecue and saw 7 children who were thriving. They still carried some scars from what they'd experienced, but they were growing up strong and confident and surrounded by people who believed them and protected them. Sophia's hair reached her shoulders, and she'd put butterfly clips in it that morning. She was teaching Madison a dance routine they'd learned at day camp, and both girls were giggling as they tried to stay in sync. "Mama," Sophia said, running over to hug me, "can we invite Grace's family to go swimming next week? Madison wants to show everyone her new diving trick." Normal childhood concerns, normal childhood friendships, normal childhood excitement about swimming and diving tricks. We'd fought our way back to normal, and it was beautiful. 3 years after the trial, I met someone at the grocery store of all places. We both reached for the same box of cereal, Lucky Charms, because Sophia was going through a phase, and laughed about it. He asked if I wanted to get coffee, and I surprised myself by saying yes. His name was James, and he worked as a paramedic for Hennepin County EMS. When I told him about Sophia and our history during our 3rd date, he didn't run away or act uncomfortable. He just listened and said we were survivors. "I've seen a lot of bad situations in my work," he said, "and I've seen how strong people can be when they're protecting someone they love. You and Sophia are some of the strongest people I've ever met." When I introduced him to Sophia after we'd been dating for 2 months, she was cautious but polite. James didn't try to force a relationship or act like he was trying to replace her father. He just sat on the floor and built Legos with her while I made dinner. "He's okay," Sophia told me after he left. "He listens when I talk, and he doesn't ask too many questions about the bad stuff. James understood why we took things slowly. He understood why Sophia sometimes had nightmares and why certain things could trigger anxiety for both of us. He was patient and kind, and he showed up consistently without expecting anything in return. Marcus and David had become permanent fixtures in our lives, the uncles that Sophia had never had. They attended every school play, every dance recital, and every birthday party. They taught her how to throw a baseball and how to change a tire and how to trust men again. "Uncle Marcus," Sophia said one day while they were working on a puzzle together, "thank you for being brave that night." "You were the brave one, kiddo," Marcus said. "You figured out how to protect yourself and your friends before any of the grown-ups caught on. That takes real courage." Sophia started participating in a program at the Children's Advocacy Center, where older kids who'd been through trauma talked to younger children who were just beginning their healing process. She was still too young to be a peer counselor, but she helped set up for workshops and handed out coloring pages during snack time. One little girl asked her if monsters were real, and Sophia's answer made me so proud. Sometimes people act like monsters, but there are always heroes, too. And sometimes kids have to be heroes for each other until the grown-up heroes figure out what's happening. The state sent a letter saying they'd approved additional funding for long-term therapy, since all 7 girls were showing excellent progress in their recovery. They acknowledged that the system had failed initially, and that this funding was their attempt to ensure that families like ours didn't have to choose between healing and financial stability. 5 years after that night in Derek's basement, I stood in our kitchen making breakfast for a very different kind of family gathering. Sophia, now 12 years old with hair past her shoulders and confidence in her voice, was helping me set the table for our annual Family Day celebration. All 7 families would be there, along with Marcus and David and Detective Martinez, who'd become a friend over the years. Even some of the prosecutors and victim advocates who'd worked on our case usually stopped by to see how the children were doing. "Mom," Sophia said, arranging napkins with careful precision, "Grace wants to know if she can bring her boyfriend to meet everyone." Grace was now 14 and had been dating a nice boy from her high school drama club for a few months. The fact that she was comfortable enough to bring him around the family was a huge step in her healing process. "Of course she can," I said. "What about Madison? Is she still planning to perform her monologue?" Madison had discovered a love for theater and was preparing for high school auditions. She'd written a piece about courage and resilience that she wanted to share with the group. The doorbell started ringing around noon, and soon our house was filled with laughter and conversation. Watching these children, now teenagers and preteens, joking around and acting like normal kids was the most beautiful thing in the world. Linda found me in the kitchen while I was refilling the lemonade pitcher. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't made that call to Marcus?" "I try not to," I said honestly. "I prefer to focus on how things turned out." 18 months, Linda said. "That's how long Derek served before he was killed in prison. I know I'm supposed to feel bad about that, but you don't have to feel bad about feeling relieved." I said, "He can never hurt anyone else's children now." Amanda had been released after serving 8 years of her sentence. She was required to register as a sex offender and was prohibited from living near schools or playgrounds. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona and was working at a call center under constant supervision. Detective Martinez joined us in the kitchen, carrying a stack of paper plates. "The girls look amazing," she said. "You can hardly tell what they went through." "They're not the same children they would have been if this hadn't happened," I said. "But they're strong and brave and surrounded by people who love them. Sometimes that's the best healing you can hope for." Marcus stood up after dinner to make his traditional toast. "Family protects family," he said, raising his glass of sweet tea. "And sometimes family means the people who show up when you need them, not just the people you're related to." Everyone raised their glasses, even the kids, who had their own glasses of lemonade and soda. The other mothers were all there with their daughters, who ran around the yard playing games and acting like the teenagers and preteens they were supposed to be. As the sun set over our backyard celebration, I found myself standing on the back deck watching Sophia and her friends light sparklers and write their names in the air with bright trails. James stood beside me, his arm around my waist, and I felt grateful for the life we'd built together. What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How quiet she used to be," I said, watching Sophia laugh as she helped Grace spell out her boyfriend's name with a sparkler. After we got her back from Derek, she barely spoke above a whisper for months. Look at her now. Sophia was 12 years old, confident, outgoing, and excited about starting middle school in the fall. She'd joined the student council and was planning to run for class treasurer. Her hair was long and healthy, and she wore it in different styles without any fear or anxiety. "She's incredible," James said. "You both are." Marcus and David had become the uncles to all 7 girls, and they never missed a birthday party or school play or dance recital. They'd taught the girls practical skills like changing tires and throwing punches, but more importantly, they'd shown them what good men looked like. The Children's Advocacy Center had asked me to speak at their annual fundraising dinner about the importance of believing children and recognizing unusual patterns of behavior. It was hard to talk about what we'd been through, but if it helped other families avoid similar situations, it was worth it. "Zatake, the system failed us initially," I told the audience of social workers, law enforcement officers, and community leaders, but the children didn't fail each other. They created their own protection network when the adults couldn't see what was happening. The case had resulted in significant changes to how child abuse investigations were conducted in Minnesota. Multiple children showing similar behaviors now triggered automatic coordination between agencies, and there were new protocols for handling cases where the accused parent had poisoned the well by preemptively claiming the other parent was unstable. Detective Martinez had been promoted and now ran the Special Victims Unit. She often used our case as a training example for new officers about the importance of looking beyond surface explanations and recognizing that children's unusual behavior usually has an underlying cause. These girls saved themselves, she told trainees. They figured out a survival strategy that kept them as safe as possible within an impossible situation. Our job is to recognize when children are trying to tell us something, even if they can't use words to explain it. That night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were clean and the yard was picked up, I tucked Sophia into bed just like I had every night since she was a baby. But now it was a choice. Not a desperate attempt to create one moment of safety in a world full of fear. "Mom," she said, settling into her pillow with her stuffed unicorn, "can I tell you something?" "Always," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I'm glad I cut my hair that time," she said, "even though it was scary and I didn't want to be ugly, because it kept me and my friends safe until you could figure out how to save us." You were so brave," I said, brushing a strand of her long, healthy hair away from her face. "You and all your friends. You took care of each other when the grown-ups couldn't. Will you tell me the story about Uncle Marcus and Uncle David coming to save us?" she asked. It had become one of her favorite bedtime stories, not the scary parts, but the part where the good guys showed up and made everything safe. I told her the story one more time, about how I called in a favor I'd sworn I'd never use, and how Marcus and David dropped everything to help us when we needed them most, about how sometimes family means the people who show up when you're in trouble, not just the people you're related to. She fell asleep holding her unicorn, her long hair spread across her pillow like silk. I checked under her bed out of habit, but there were no scissors hidden there anymore. She was free to be beautiful and confident and safe. In the hallway, I passed the photo collage we'd made for the 5-year anniversary of that night. Pictures of all 7 girls at various stages of their recovery and growth, birthday parties, school plays, soccer games, and dance recitals. Normal childhood memories that replaced the trauma. The favor I'd called in from Marcus had cost us both in some ways. He and David had criminal records now from the breaking and entering charges, though they'd been reduced to community service given the circumstances. But neither of them regretted it for a second. "Family protects family," Marcus always said. And sometimes that means breaking a few rules. James was waiting for me in our bedroom, reading a book and giving me space to process the emotions that always came up during our annual gatherings. These celebrations were joyful, but they also served as reminders of how close we'd come to losing everything. "Good day?" he asked, setting aside his book. "Perfect day," I said, and meant it. "Sophia wants to invite everyone to go camping this summer. All 7 families, plus Marcus and David and Detective Martinez. Sounds like we're going to need a bigger campsite," James said, smiling. "Sounds like we're going to need an even bigger family," I said, and realized that was exactly what we'd created. A family built from survival and love and the fierce determination to protect the children who'd saved themselves when no one else could. What made me call in a favor I'd sworn I'd never use? The discovery that sometimes the system fails, sometimes the adults can't help, and sometimes children have to save themselves until someone finally listens to what they're trying to say. But the real answer is simpler than that. Love. Love for my daughter and the children she'd risked everything to protect. Love that was stronger than fear, stronger than legal consequences, stronger than the possibility of losing everything. That's what family does. That's what love does. And sometimes that's exactly what it takes to save the people who matter most.